Today I'm sitting down with Mitchell Ross. Mitchell, thank you so much for joining me. And today we're going to talk about Mitchell's story, where he came from, why he got into real estate, what he was doing before real estate, how he helps people, and anything else Mitchell wants to talk about today. So Mitchell, for people that don't know you, do you want to give a little intro of who you are?
I'd be happy to. Well, thanks for having me. This is such an awesome and exciting opportunity. Again, I'm Mitchell Ross. I've been in real estate almost 9 years. We've helped, my team and I have helped well over 200 families over the course of our career. We're really proud. We really specialize in the Reno community. That's where we factor and we do the most of our business. But, we really got into the business just looking for a great opportunity, and things just kind of fell in place, and I'm really excited to share my story.
Excellent. So 9 years in,
Yeah.
I know you've lived in Reno most of your life, well over 20 years now. What originally sparked your interest to get into real estate?
Yeah. So before I got into real estate, I was quote unquote in between jobs. My dad had bought a business that he and I had grown together. I would just left college. He asked me to help. And so when we sold that business, after it got too big for us to kind of manage, I was kind of in between looking for something to do. And I was doing business to business sales, and just wasn't my cup of tea. And at the time, my wife had gotten licensed. And in her first year, she sold 17 houses, buys and sells.
Wow.
And naive, kind of hubris young man, I was like, well, how hard could it be? I'll come help y'all get licensed.
I
can do that, right?
Yeah.
2017, I got licensed, was July. And one of the things about me is I don't do anything halfway. I always want to know exactly what's going on, more like 120 miles per hour versus 60, right? And so I was like, well, I need to do a transaction. And I remember, so I was at Chase International at the time, and I needed a mentor. So I got a mentor. We were doing an open house, and we're at this open house, and the mentor I was with, somebody walked in and they said, hey, we don't really like this condo, but there's one we've been eyeing on. Could you get us in there? I said, absolutely. So she sends me over there. I've never opened a lockbox. My hands are shaking, open the lockbox. Anyways, long story short, this set of clients bought that condo. And I can remember, Shay, still, when we closed, I made this big ceremony, right? So I handed her the key, and the two of them, it was first time home buyer, and they were beside themselves, just crying. And I remember being just honestly really moved by that experience, right? Like, I got to help somebody, they trusted us. We knocked it out of the park, of course, we did a great job, but that moment was great. And then transparently, a couple of weeks later, like, I wasn't gonna make this my gig, I got the check. And after the referral fees and all this stuff, I was like, that's still a pretty good sized check. And so I devoted the rest of my career to doing that, recreating that experience for buyers and sellers. And so not only is it fulfilling, but the money's good. So that's how we got in, and that was 9 years ago.
That's awesome, man. I know. So you come from an entrepreneurial background. You said your dad bought a business. You helped him grow that. You were telling me a little bit about it off camera, and I think it's an interesting business to talk about. And I think
Sure.
if I'm a listener, I would love to know about it. Tell people about what that was.
Yeah. So my dad, when I graduated college, bought a company called Starcade, and we retained that name while we owned the business. And it was an amusement game business. So if you're from Reno and you remember Wild Island before their big remodel, all of those machines at the Coconut Bowl and at Wild Island were owned and operated by the company that my dad and I bought. And so when we originally bought it, we had about 115 units, about 10 locations. And so when I say a unit, I'm meaning like an arcade machine. And back in the day, they were like, Metal Slug and Time Crisis and driving games and stuff.
Yeah.
And we tripled the size of that business. And so at one point, it just got to be too big. It's a cash business. And so that's when we sold it. But what was really fun is because it was a family business, I got to get my hands in all of the pieces, right? I got to a little bit of the accounting. I got to do inventory management. I got to do sales with customers and cash deposits. And so it really opened up my eyes to the difference between being an employee and being a business owner and entrepreneur. And I realized that while there's a lot of risk and some being a business owner can be scary at times, that was much more motivating for me than having a constant paycheck. And so after that, it was just, how do I go find places where I can be a business owner and grow,
Yeah, certainly. That's so cool. Did you guys have golden tee by chance?
We did.
I'm not a huge golfer, but golden tee, I'd sit there and spin that ball so fast.
I have replaced
a few of them.
I've replaced several golden tee spin balls in my career, but yeah.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
I'd say my favorite, definitely Gallagher. I was a big,
Sure.
hitting the keys as fast as I could.
Yep.
That's awesome. So, no, I think that's great too, because if I'm a buyer and I'm working with you, right? Not only do I want to buy real estate, but if I'm a buyer, I would be asking you all sorts of stuff about business. Like, hey, what do you think about this idea? Or what do you think about that? Or So I think for anyone listening, Mitchell's a good sounding board for business ideas, it sounds like. Okay, so you're doing that. You get into real estate.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about your family, man. I know you've got a wife, you've got a kid.
Yep.
Yeah, what's that like?
So Mackinzie, my wife, we just celebrated 11 years last week. So we've been married 11 years. Thank you. And my daughter will turn 7 at the end of this month. And real estate has really given us a great ability to get as close to work-life balance as possible, right? I'm not sure that really exists, especially doing what we do. But having built a business here, I got in before I had a kid. And so in the early days, it was, Monday through Friday, all hours of the day, open houses, showings. But as we've grown and matured with the industry, it's really allowed us to put more, what I'd say, guardrails on our business. And so we have, transaction coordinators. I've gone through the whole gambit. I've done residential sales. I've done leadership. I've been productivity coach. I've been a team leader. And so we've gotten to see all sorts of dynamics of the industry, but it has allowed us to figure out where we need leverage so that we can really be present for our family. And so we travel a lot, and having the right pieces in place in our business allows us to be really present with our kid. And so I'm the vice president of our PTO. And so, so I'm always kind of involved, and I don't think I would have gotten to do that if it wasn't for real estate.
Absolutely, man. Yeah. You guys have built a fantastic business. I know you said over 200 families, over 9 years, which quick math, that's 20.
Roughly 22 a year.
Yeah. That's fantastic. And I know you're currently at Remax. You started out at Chase International. Okay, cool. And then is your wife still in the business?
She still is. Yep, she's licensed. We really do this as a team. She handles all of the marketing, all of the back end. Every time we get a flyer, a just listed, she creates all of that great marketing. She manages our Instagram and all of our feeds. And I'm really much more of the front. I currently build a lot of my business through door knocking and events. So, I was this morning, I was out knocking my farm, but we do pop-bys. She helps make things very pretty. And so right now we're giving out cooling rags, right? Because it's getting hot. And so I'm dropping those off to all of our clients.
Great idea.
And on the back, it says, keeping you cool, both in real estate and on the back of your head. And so she comes up with these great slogans. And so the two of us are quite the powerhouse together. I'm really blessed to have her in my corner.
Man. Yeah. So you were out door knocking this morning? Wow. Still 9 years into it, you're still door knocking.
I am. Things have shifted back and forth. When I started, it was all open houses, and then COVID, right? So I got licensed in 17, had the amazing experience with the buyer client, and 18 went in full feet. And so for the first 2 years, I did open houses, and I did 75 open houses my first year, and I did 68 open houses my second year. And that led me to roughly 25 and 26 transactions that first and second year in real estate. And then COVID happened, right? And so open houses weren't a thing. There were all these restrictions. You couldn't have people. It just became complicated, harder. But everybody was home. So I just went to where the people were. Yeah. And my brother, who's also a real estate agent in Denver, built his business door knocking. So I visited him. I got some tips and tricks, and I said, this is going to be my thing. So for the next 4 years, I door knocked. Yeah. And it was an interesting transition, because open houses, people are coming to you, and there's some resistance, but there's certainly less because they somewhat know what they're getting into.
Yeah, they're there on their own accord.
Right. But at the doors, it's a different, and I've heard a shotgun get reloaded on the other end of a door. I've had dogs chase. I mean, the very rare occasions, right. But certainly never had that at an open house. Right. But it's really great because you get to know people in a much different way, right? I talk about a farm. I have 500 doors that I knock regularly, twice a year. And those people, most of them I consider friends because I see them twice a year. I get updates on what's going on in their lives. Often it's not anything to do with real estate, but maybe they had somebody pass away, they had a kid graduate. And so it's gotten me a really great way to connect with people. And then on top of that, when we have a sale or something that's outside of our area, we communicate that via door knocking and dropping flyers and stuff like that. But it's not for everybody, but it works for me. I get my steps in, I get outside, I get to talk to people, and I'm done by 10:30 because it's too hot, and then I get the rest of my day. So
that's great.
Yeah.
That's great. That's some of the work a lot of people are not willing to do, which I respect that a lot. I built my business originally off cold calling, which was not my favorite. But
sure.
So yeah, let's talk about for buyers and sellers. All right. So right now, are you more listing heavy? Are you more buyer heavy? Is it pretty even typically?
Good question. No, it's much more listing heavy. I'm not sure why. Excuse me. I don't have a great answer as to why our business tends to be that way, but we do tend to have more listings.
That's typical over time, or is that just right now?
Right now. Yeah, I would say our database, so we are kind of bread and butter. I would say probably 60 to 70% of my business is in 89521. So it's a specific zip code in Reno. And it's usually between 750 and $1.2 million, right? And it's my experience that right now, that subsect of individuals who may or may not be buying real estate are kind of in a tougher spot than others. And what I mean by that is, as a first-time home buyer, if you can formulate a plan with your real estate professional and your mortgage advisor that makes you comfortable, it's a much easier decision, right? If you got the down payment, you got to go find the house. If the deal works out, then you're ready. If you're over $1.5 million, you're usually pretty well off. You've got a lot more cash reserves. Often you don't have to be contingent, right? You might still have a house to sell, but if you're kind of above $1.5 million, things are a little bit easier.
You don't necessarily have to.
Right. Yeah. From 750 to $1.2 million, it's a much different story. And since that's kind of the demographic of 89521, it's a lot tougher. Most of those people have a house to sell. Most of them refinanced during COVID. And so they bought their house at whatever, and now they're sitting on a 2.5 to 3.5 interest rate. But the house they've outgrown, right? It's appreciated a little bit, so they're sitting on some equity, but for them to tap into it, they need to sell. And so they may not have enough money to get to the next jump. And so they tend to be a little bit harder to get to move for no other reason other than their mortgage is low. Moving to the next step isn't a few $100s. It could be few $1,000s. And so I think that's why that little price band's a little harder. And because of that, what we're finding is some of our people are choosing to leave the area for either jobs or other reasons. And so we've had a lot of clients move from Reno to Florida, to San Jose, to Salt Lake City. And so it's easier for them because they're moving and they're going to go rent and explore the area. Reno wasn't for them or whatever. So because of that, we are a little bit more listing heavy right now.
Yeah. That makes sense. That makes sense. It is an interesting not no man's land, but interesting middle ground between the lower price points and the higher.
Right.
For buyers and sellers, what would you say is your differentiating factor for you and your wife's team? Like, they want to work with you, right?
Yeah.
They're listening to this. Like, oh, I really like Mitchell. I like his vibe. I would love to work with him. What's in it for me though, as someone working with
Sure.
him? Yeah.
It's not as tangible. It would matter to me. I think one of the things I hear often from working with people who didn't get to work with me the first time, either they bought before I got in the industry or they didn't know about me at the time, now they got a referral, is usually something comes up that didn't sit right with them with their previous experience. And I have a specific example, which is current client we're working with. She's asking us to help her buy a home. And when she was working with her previous agent 10 years ago, she had mentioned that something had happened that didn't sit well with her. So I was curious. And she said that when this agent was helping her sell her home, he never really advocated for her. They had the house on the market and the agent was consistently pushing, might be too hard, advising, requesting that she reduce the property, really make it so that he could, in her words, get a paycheck. And so you could tell that was a resistance point from her. And so one of the very first things I did when I got into the business is I made sure we had a nest egg. You often hear a lot of agents get in, they come from another industry, they don't have a lot of savings, and it's like they need a paycheck to be able to survive. And so when we got into the business, I made sure we had enough cash on hand to go an entire year without a paycheck. And we still maintain that level of money in a separate bank account. And full circle, we really care and we always put our clients first. It could literally take money out of my pocket. It could be the difference between getting a commission and not getting a commission, right? Whatever the right decision is for the clients, that's what we support.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter how it affects us.
Certainly.
And I can say that with 100% clarity because we know that if we do good business will come back to us. And I don't have to make decisions for my clients based on me because I've got my nest egg. We don't have to have that. It doesn't ever have to come in the back.
Survive.
Right. It never comes in the back of my mind of, oh, I really need that paycheck. Do I really want to tell them? It never happens. We're always transparent and you get 100% honesty, whether you like the information or not.
Certainly. I love that. And when I got in the mortgage business, I got a coach this second time around. And that's one of the first things he said. He said, build up the nest egg because you'll be able to advise people much better.
And we've gone times where it's been 90 or 100 days without a paycheck, just the cycle of where we're at, right? We had a good quarter and then it slows down and it hurts sometimes, right? But we never have to make decisions based on that. And that really allows us to show up as 100% authentic as well as 100% for them, whatever that looks like.
Yeah,
so
certainly. That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fantastic. So, I mean, is there any advice in today's market? I know right now, interest rates are higher than they were. I wouldn't say historically they're not
Sure.
high, but they're higher than they were comparatively. So, I mean, any advice for buyers and sellers in today's market?
Well, it would depend, right? Depends on what
Depends
they were
on everybody's
asking.
situation.
But I would say, for sellers, Reno's been this way for a while. I always tell people, a lot of people want to move. And one of the things with Reno is our price point tends to be high. It just does. We're an expensive city. And so what I tell people is if you're looking to move, but you want to stay in the city, you probably can't move 1 mile. You might be able to move 10, but you can for sure go 100. And so I have a lot of people when they're selling say, well, we really would like to move up, but if they stay in the same neighborhood or the same zip code and they want to move up, that's going to cost a lot of money. But for instance, if you went from Reno to Sparks, you could probably get a bigger home with more land for the exact same dollar. 10 miles, not 1, right? So being realistic, I think is a huge proponent about anything with real estate, whether you're buying or selling. I also think that oftentimes people forget how long the process takes in any capacity, right? I think buyers have a tendency to call 3 days before they're ready to make a decision as opposed to 6 months prior so that we can make a plan, right? I'm sure you see this all the time, Shay, where somebody's like, hey, we're ready to buy. We've been thinking about this for months, but we're now calling you. And then you do a credit check and you're like,
you want to fill out the application link I sent you 6 months ago?
right. And you're like, we could have resolved some of these things. We had a client a couple of years ago who was 100% ready to go, but they had a delinquency on their credit. And it wasn't through any fault of their own. It was a misappropriation, just something went wrong. Yeah. But it took 60 days for the lender to get the right documentation, get that removed. And they didn't lose a house or anything, but it certainly delayed them by 60 days. And so I think people feel that there's some resistance to asking for help from their lender or agent. They think they're just going to be hounded. If you've got the right person, it's a relationship. You're not feeling pressured to sell. And so start that conversation sooner. And even, I guess I would go as far as saying, if you're a buyer thinking about buying in the next year or two, go meet a couple of real estate agents and figure out who you'd want to work with, because you can start to build that relationship today. Because at least for me, this is a relationship business. I'm not here to help one person buy one house one time and never hear from them again, right? I door knock, right? So I'm relationship. Sometimes it takes 3, 4, 5 years for somebody to do something. But if you get the right person, they're going to help you through that process and you'll be so much better served for doing so.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. I think that's great info for both buyers and sellers, and getting the process started sooner than later.
Right.
It just gives people more time to dial you in, whether that's your credit, whether that's putting a plan together to help get you to the monthly payment you want, or if you're paying all cash, getting you the house you want.
Right.
So let's go back to talking about your journey through real estate.
Sure.
So I know you said you've done multiple things. You've worn multiple hats. Let's talk about that. So you started out.
Yep. So started out at Chase International, solo agent, was trying to decide if I was to stay residential or commercial, because both are, available as options. Decided that residential was for sure where I wanted to go, especially after that experience. And commercial tends to be more about the dollars, right? It's more focused about, does the deal make sense, versus residential real estate is much more about the feeling that it exudes from the clients, right? It's always about the mortgage, but it's often about how people feel when they're in the space, and that can change things drastically. So after we did that, I realized very quickly that I wasn't good for paperwork. And so we leveraged out our transaction coordination. So we got a full-time TC, which was life-saving. It allowed me to focus on my clients. And I was at Chase for about 1.5 years. And then I decided that needed something different. At the time, my wife had moved from selling real estate to working on the leadership side of the brokerage. So she actually moved to Keller Williams. I followed suit with her. And Keller Williams is really where I think I fell in love with the industry, because Keller Williams is a really special kind of brokerage, in my opinion, having been and seen a lot of different ones. There is the KW Kool-Aid, right? There's a very different culture at Keller Williams, but I got exposed to a lot of different things. And so one of the very first things that I got exposed to was leadership from an industry level. So at Keller Williams, every office has what they call an ALC, which is the Agent Leadership Council. And they help create policies for each market center that helps support their agents. And so I was on that board for 2 or 3 years, helping the direction of the market center between the owners, because each Keller Williams is a franchise, between the owners and the agents themselves. And I really got to see the impact that we could make. And so from there, I started teaching classes for first-time agents. I taught several open house seminars, because at the time I was really big into open houses. I'd just come from doing all these open houses. And over time, I started teaching classes about, how to do buyer workshops, how to do pop-ups and events, some of the things that we were doing. And when we had some leadership change at Keller Williams, they needed a full-time coach because they were doing a mentorship program, and those can be difficult. And so after it was about my third or fourth year with them, I got the opportunity to be their productivity coach. And so it was my responsibility, in addition to facilitating my business. And at that time, we had a full-time admin, the TC, and all the rest of the leverage. It required me to manage roughly 20 agents and helping them through their journey, right? How to write a contract, how to prepare a listing appointment, how to talk to clients, right? What things are worth having conversations about, how to direct them. And so that was a lot of fun. And I got to be a productivity coach for a year and a half. And that was what initially started my team journey. So went from a solo agent to a new brokerage with some leadership experience. And when I left Keller Williams, it was a really humbling experience. It wasn't, the culture wasn't a good fit anymore, which is why I ended up at RE/MAX Professionals. And I love Corey and Susan. And when I left, there were a couple of agents who felt that there was a void at Keller Williams and asked to come join my team. And I'm like, I'm not doing a team. I just moved brokerages. And they wouldn't take no for an answer. So when I left, I had these 3 agents follow me, and we started the Mitchell Ross Homes team. It was a blast, and it was chaos, and it was everything in between. You know, helping 3 agents full-time on your team is very different from being just like a productivity coach and just kind of oversight. And I realized that there's a lot of fun there, but it wasn't my best use of skills. And what ended up happening is I got really, really focused on their success and started taking my foot off the gas pedal with my business. And so door knocking stopped. Open houses stopped, right? And so all I was doing was calling my database, doing events, and we weren't growing. And neither were they, right? It just, not everybody was built for real estate. And so about a year ago, disbanded the team and went back to the basics. And so I've come all the way full circle.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And it's just our little small team, my wife and I, and we've got an assistant, and again, the TC, and you know, it works much better for us. We can get back to the basics, get back to the clients.
Yeah, run super lean. What's the biggest takeaway you got from doing all those different things over the years?
The biggest keys were the clarity on who I can be for my people, my people being my clients. Everybody in the industry, when you start talking about the big dollars, talk about teams, right? You gotta have the other agents who are doing the sales for you. And I'm not disagreeing with that. I think that that's certainly an avenue, but you can be very successful as a solo agent with some good leverage. And what I learned is who we were as a business, right? Who the Mitchell Ross Homes team was. And it wasn't about having a bunch of agents doing 2 or 3 transactions. It was about us being really intentional with who we worked with. Being in leadership at Keller Williams, I got to be exposed to a lot of different minds. And so I got to fly to different market centers and learn how they were doing things and how they were coaching. And that leadership absolutely came right back into my business. Like how I help my clients changed after I got to do those kinds of things and those experiences. One of the things was really thinking about talking slow and meeting people with where they're at. And so the biggest takeaway was just, really understanding where our strengths were. And we didn't need to have a team of 35 agents to be successful. Yeah. And so now we can be much more thin and much more flexible, right? Because I'm not having to be at the office managing other fires. And since they're ours, we don't have as many, right? So yeah, that was probably the biggest takeaway.
That's great. That's great. A lot of trial and iteration, it sounds like, to figure out, and that's ultimately, I think that's a huge takeaway for a lot of anyone listening or anyone in life in general. Is like, iterate, man, try new things.
Right. You got to fail.
You'll learn no matter what. Worst case is you learn. That's great, man. Is there anything you want to add?
I think just the last little bit, which is, failure is really important, I think, in business. And I started a health journey about a year ago, going to the gym and eating healthier.
Good.
Thank you. Yeah. And I came across this reel or whatever it was, and it really kind of hit me in a way that really changed the way I looked at my business, which was when we go into the gym, we accept failure as the way to growth, right? We push weight and we expect to fail, and we know that failure yields to the results we're looking for. But yet we don't allow that in our regular lives, right? And that was so impactful to me because it's true, right? Like I don't want to make mistakes at home, right? We avoid failure. I don't want to make mistakes in my business. That makes me look weak or whatever the analogy is. But as I've leaned into that and gotten comfortable with the opportunity for failure, the results on the other end of that have been massive, both in my personal life and my family. Being a little bit more vulnerable at home, being more vulnerable in our business, who we say yes to. Like, we don't always take every client anymore. And that comes from fear, right? So we've made mistakes. We can't do everything for everybody, but that's allowed us to have more doors open because of that. And so leaning into that failure was really big.
I think that's a great takeaway. Anybody listening, fail more, learn more, do more.
Amen.
Life's going to be all right. We're all going to die someday. So just go live it up, man. Go live it up. Mitchell, thank you so much.
It's truly my
For
pleasure.
people that want to work with you, I'll include the information
Please
in the
do.
description below.
Yep.
Thanks for taking the time.
Always.
And if you'd love to work with Mitchell, check out the description below. His contact info will be there. Reach out to him directly. Thanks so much.
My pleasure.